Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is cast. Let's take a moment and review some of the definitions or the ways that we use this verb. The first way you might hear cast used means to cause light or shadow to appear on a surface. And this definition actually includes part of a phrase that's quite common to cast a shadow on something, right? So causing that. A second way you're likely to hear cast used, especially in the coming months here in the United States, is to talk about the action of voting. So, sort of filling out and submitting your ballot. This is another verb you'll hear used to describe that. A third way cast gets used is in connection to fishing. So, if you're throwing a net or maybe a baited fishing line out into the water, again, that action of throwing either the net or the line can be described with this verb. A fourth way you might hear cast used means to shape some type of material by pouring it into a mold while it is molten. Molten meaning extremely hot. So you might think of various substances. It could be something like a plastic, right? Very, very hot. It's liquid. It's poured into something to form a particular shape. A fifth way the verb cast gets used can mean to assign a part in a play, a film, or some other type of production to a particular actor. Okay? And a sixth way we can use the verb cast means to direct one's eyes at something or just to look at something. Now, for the moment, you should know that cast is an irregular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of the verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms casting. The reason this is an irregular verb is because our past tense form and the participle form of the verb doesn't follow our normal ed endings. You might be used to having different spellings, but we don't have that. Actually, our past tense and our participle form of the verb is the same as that base verb. So it's going to have the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation. You might think of this, if it helps to have kind of other verbs in mind, put and quit could be other examples where the verb just does not change. Okay? Now, our verb of the day, cast, actually has even more meanings, and those meanings come to us through phrasal verbs. So today we're going to focus on talking about many other ways to use our verb cast. And the first phrasal verb we'll discuss is to cast about. Generally, when someone uses this, they are describing the action of trying to find something. Here it is in an example sentence. The company has cast about for something to create big sales, right? So they're trying to sort of find maybe the next big marketing idea, or maybe it's the next big product. Okay? This sentence is an example of the present perfect. So we're talking about an action started in the past, continues into the present. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to cast aside. This can mean to throw something away. An example of this. These people have been cast aside by their families and communities. Okay? Here, we're looking at a passive voice sentence. So if you're looking at the verb and kind of wondering about the verb tense there, it is present perfect again, but this time in passive voice instead of active voice. And this phrasal verb is used quite often to talk about maybe individuals who have been sort of pushed out or pushed away from groups, in this case, maybe families and communities. So I saw a sentence very similar to this as a politician was talking about how we treat the unhoused or homeless individuals. Okay? Another phrasal verb that has pretty much a similar meaning is to cast away. It also means to throw away. An example of this. Before moving, he cast away old schoolwork and mementos. This would be an example of a simple past tense sentence. I can tell with the time signals there, right? We're talking about an action that is completed. Here. It just means he didn't pack those things and continue to take them to his new home. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to cast back. Now, this is not so much a literal throw as it is to kind of throw our mind back into the past. So, an example of this. The song casts back to childhood summer nights, right? So, what we're describing here is kind of the song makes someone think about what was it like to be a child during the summer, maybe the things they did with their friends or their family. That's an example of a simple present sentence. Last phrasal verb on this page of my notes is to cast down. Okay? Again, we go back to that meaning of throwing something, but here you're throwing it forcefully downward. An example of this might be, he cast the book down and left the room. Okay? This sounds like another simple past tense sentence. I'm thinking that because I see another simple past tense verb, left, kind of helping me create meaning by looking at those other words in the sentences. So maybe we're talking about someone who is angry, upset, right? You can kind of envision forcefully putting the book down and then leaving. Let's talk about some other phrasal verbs. The next one you might encounter is to cast off. This can have a couple different meanings. One might be to discard something or to reject it. An example of this, she cast off a great deal of clothing this spring. Okay, so again, a little similar to that idea of throwing away. So maybe you hear of people doing spring cleaning. They might be looking at, are these things that still fit? Are they things I'm still wearing? And doesn't necessarily mean the clothes went into the trash. It might have been donated to another organization, but they are no longer in this person's possession. Here, I think this is another good example of simple past tense. A second way you can use cast off means to let go or let loose of something. An example of this, we'll cast off the hunting dog once we get to that field. Right? So here, maybe the dog is on a leash, right? It's under control, and this is really suggesting we're going to take the dog off leash. The last phrasal verb we'll discuss is to cast out. This can also have a couple different meanings. One is to rid one's mind of something, right? So kind of like throwing a thought away. An example of this, I cast out negative thoughts before my race. I've heard sentences very similar to this as Olympians were interviewed in the last few weeks, recounting their experiences while competing for gold medals, right? So just kind of, I got rid of those negative thoughts. The last way you could use cast out might mean to expel or drive something out with force. An example of this, Germany's far right party has been cast out by European partners. Okay? Again, this is an example of passive voice in the present perfect. Okay? And I saw sentences similar to this in the last few months as elections have been held. And again, kind of that idea of voters expelling, driving out by force. Now let's talk about some words that are related to our verb cast. And the first word we're going to talk about is just the noun form of this word. The noun cast has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. Similar to the verb, the noun has a number of different meanings. I picked out three that I thought you might be more likely to encounter. So the first way you could hear or see the noun cast used can refer to an object that is made by shaping molten metal. Remember, that's that very hot, or some other type of similar material in some type of mold. An example of this might be the students made plaster casts as part of their senior project. Okay, so that's the material, they're plaster, right? And so again, trying to create these certain shapes, maybe they fill it in with something else and paint it, decorate it, who knows. A second way to use the noun cast is to talk about a bandage that has been stiffened with plaster and molded into the shape of whatever limb has been broken. It's usually done to protect that limb from further injury, allow time for the bone to heal. So, an example of this. All my classmates signed my cast when I broke my arm in the first grade. True story. I was on monkey bars and a little too aggressive, and how many bars I was trying to skip fell, landed on my arm. But part of that stiffened plaster, or the fun of it, is having people sign their name with markers, or at least it was back in the 80s. A third way to use the noun cast is to talk about a group of actors that are part of a play, a film, or could be a TV show, some other kind of production. An example of this. The cast and crew put on a wonderful production this weekend. So the cast is referring to the actors. The crew would be sort of all the people behind the scenes making things happen. So usually it takes both groups to have a very successful production. Another related word you might encounter is castable, right? This is an adjective, common pattern in English to see that able ending, and no, that word is an adjective, so able to be casted. An example, or actually I have two examples how we can kind of connect this back to our verb. So castable polymers made from castor beans could replace conventional plastics. So here the castable is describing a type of material that could be shaped in a mold, right? It's going back to that definition. But another way we could use castable is this role even castable, right? So we're kind of knowing or asking, sorry, we're asking, can we find an actor who can play this particular part? One more word for us to discuss today. It's the noun castability. This is the ease with which a material can be cast while it still meets quality requirements. So it's going to go back to that idea of using molds, again, maybe very hot metals or other material in order to shape something. An example of this new braided fishing line has impressive durability and castability. So that particular sentence really goes back to that idea of fishing, right? So it's talking about the quality of the line as well as its sort of ability to last as someone kind of continues that process of fishing. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you all have a great day.